Try something with me. Read the next 5 sentences without touching your phone. No glances, no checking the time, no quick scroll, just to see if there's a notification. If your hand twitches or your eyes start scanning the room for a screen, that is not weakness. That is training. Someone has been quietly teaching your brain to run on reflex instead of reason. So you react, agree, and obey before you ever stop to ask, is this even true? Here's how it works, and I will prove it to you in under a minute. Every day you are pulled through a silent loop. Sedate you with endless stimulation, so thinking feels heavy. Divide you into tribes, so questioning feels dangerous. And automate your judgments so conclusions arrive pre-installed. I call it the thought extinction loop. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This morning alone, you probably scrolled past a headline that spiked your heartbeat, a comment that told you what to believe, and a share button that made that belief feel right. 40 seconds, zero real analysis. That was not you deciding. That was the loop completing itself. And here's the worst part. It does not just strip away your ability to think. It makes you comfortable without it. It rewards you for the reflex, for the quick nod, for the instant reaction. Every like is a pat on the head. Every outrage cycle is a spark in your nervous system. And slowly, without ever meaning to, you become fluent in the language of reaction and forget the language of reflection. If any part of your mind still belongs to you, stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, I will take you inside the very systems designed to dull your clarity. I will show you how they rewire your habits, hijack your instincts, and turn your own intelligence into a liability. And more importantly, I will give you the tools to break the loop before it becomes permanent. Because here's the truth, no one says out loud. If they can quietly kill your ability to think, they can quietly choose your life and call it your choice. You have probably felt it before without having the words for it, an invisible current pulling you along, nudging your thoughts in directions you didn't choose. That current has a name now, the thought extinction loop. When you name something, you strip away its camouflage. You turn a vague unease into a clear opponent. You make it visible, which makes it beatable. And this loop is worth seeing for what it really is, because it's operating in your life right now. The thought extinction loop has 3 stages. They don't always happen in order, but together, they form a closed circuit that slowly erases your ability to think for yourself. Stage 1. Sedate first. They overload your senses until the idea of deep thinking feels exhausting. Dopamine hits come from everywhere. Scrolls, notifications, news alerts, autoplay videos, outrage headlines, flashing ads. Every tap delivers a microdose of stimulation that makes the slower, quieter work of reflection feel like a chore. You've heard people say, "I just can't focus anymore." That's not a character flaw. That's the sedation working exactly as intended. It's easier to pacify a distracted mind than a focused one. Stage 2. Divide. Next, they slice society into tribes and feed each one a carefully curated diet of narratives. These narratives make questioning dangerous. If you step outside your tribe's beliefs, you risk losing belonging, respect, even relationships. And when the fear of exile hangs over every conversation, most people learn to stop asking real questions. Instead, they repeat what their group rewards and ignore what it punishes. Division doesn't just polarize, it paralyzes. When you're busy defending your side, you're not examining the truth. Stage 3. Automate finally. They replace your own judgment with ready-made conclusions. Algorithms, media outlets, and even well-meaning authorities hand you bite-sized answers that feel satisfying enough to end the search for truth. The more you consume these prepackaged conclusions, the more your mental muscles atrophy. You stop wrestling with complexity. You stop holding tension between opposing ideas. And eventually, the act of thinking feels unnecessary because the loop has done it for you. Sedate, divide, automate. Run them often enough, and you no longer need to silence people who think. You'll live in a world where fewer and fewer people even remember how. This is why naming the enemy matters. Without a name, it's just life or how things are now. With a name, you can spot each stage as it happens. You can pause mid-scroll and say, "This is sedation." You can hear a divisive headline and think, "This is the divide step." You can see a trending fact and ask, "Whose conclusion am I about to automate into my brain?" And once you can name the loop, you can break it. Step 1 of the loop: sedate. Picture this. You're in the middle of a conversation with someone you care about. They're speaking, you're nodding, and without realizing it, your hand slides toward your phone. You don't even know what you're checking for. A message, a headline, a number on a little red circle. You glance, you scroll, you glance back up. You caught almost none of what they just said. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. That wasn't an accident. That was conditioning. The dopamine-trapped neuroscientist Daniel Levitin has shown that the average person today processes 5 times more information daily than just a few decades ago. Every ping, every pop-up, every breaking notification is a micro-hit of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Each one teaches you, interrupt yourself, chase the hit. The problem? Dopamine isn't designed for deep thought. It's designed for seeking, and the more you train your brain to seek constant stimulation, the harder it becomes to sustain the stillness that thinking demands. Over time, your baseline shifts. Quiet focus starts to feel uncomfortable. Boredom feels unbearable. Reflection, the very foundation of critical thinking, becomes something you avoid without even knowing why. The skim-mind cognitive neuroscientist Marianne Wolf warns that our brains are being rewired by digital reading. We skim headlines. We swipe past paragraphs. We jump between tabs like skipping stones across water, never going deep enough to see what's underneath. Here's a micro story you might recognize. You sit down to read an article. 2 paragraphs in, your eyes dart to the bottom to see how long it is. You skim, maybe scroll halfway, then think, I'll come back to it later. You rarely do. That's not laziness, that's the sedate stage in action. Sedation isn't about making you sleepy. It's about making you comfortably numb. The muscle that withers. Think of attention like a muscle. The more you lift, the stronger it gets. The more you stretch it with books, problem solving, and unbroken thought, the more weight it can carry. But if you replace all heavy lifting with quick reps, 15-second videos, snack-sized quotes, listicles, the muscle shrinks. Soon, holding a single thought in your head for more than a minute feels like strain. This is why "I can't focus" has become a cultural chorus. It's not that humans suddenly lost discipline. It's that the environment is training your mind to sprint in circles instead of walk in straight lines. The perfect climate for control. And here's where it gets dark. A sedated mind is easier to control. When thinking feels like effort, you default to the easiest available answer. And the easiest answer is usually the one handed to you. If you've ever shared an article without reading it in full, agreed with a point because everyone else seemed to, or reacted instantly without stopping to ask, wait, do I actually believe this? That's sedation doing its job. It's the first and most essential stage of the thought extinction loop because without it, the other 2 stages, divide and automate, don't stick. You can't be divided into tribes if you're still thinking clearly. You won't accept automated conclusions if you still have the energy to question them. So, the loop starts by making sure that the act of thinking itself feels too heavy to bother with. Breaking the sedation. The most dangerous thing about sedation is that you often don't feel it happening. That's why naming it matters. The next time you check your phone mid-conversation, catch yourself. The next time you feel the itch to skip to the end of an article, stop. Recognize it as sedate mode. Not you, but the loop. Because the moment you can see sedation for what it is, you weaken its hold, and that's where the fight begins. From here, we move to the second stage of the loop, divide, where sedation turns into separation. And separation becomes the weapon that keeps people from questioning anything at all. Step 2 of the loop, divide. If sedation is about dulling your mind, division is about shaping what little attention you have left. Once you're sedated, the loop moves to stage 2, divide, because nothing locks a person into unthinking loyalty like the fear of losing their tribe. The mechanics of division works by feeding you narratives that make questioning dangerous. It's not enough to give you opinions. Those opinions must become part of your identity. Once they do, disagreement isn't just a debate, it's betrayal. Psychologists have studied this for decades. Irving Janis called it groupthink, the tendency for people in a group to silence doubts, ignore alternatives, and conform to consensus for the sake of harmony. The social cost of being the dissenter feels heavier than the cost of being wrong. Layered onto this is social proof, our natural impulse to take our cues from the crowd. If everyone in your group agrees on something, your brain assumes it must be true. Challenge it, and you risk more than being mistaken. You risk exile. Real-world example: the comment section. Trap. Spend 5 minutes in the comment section of any controversial post, and you'll see it unfold in real time. An outsider voice enters with a question or a different perspective. The replies arrive fast and hostile: ridicule, sarcasm, accusations. Others pile on, not always because they disagree, but because defending the group's narrative earns approval, likes, and in-group praise. It's not just the original commenter who learns the lesson. Every silent observer watching thinks, "I'm not going to be the next target," and just like that, the possibility of open dialogue collapses. When headlines become loyalty tests, division thrives on headlines designed not to inform, but to provoke allegiance. You've seen them. Anyone who believes X is ignorant. The real enemy is people like. These headlines don't invite thought. They issue a challenge. Are you with us or against us? Once that frame is set, facts become secondary. You either wear the badge of your tribe or risk being painted as the enemy. And when you're busy proving your loyalty, you're not asking the deeper questions. Is this narrative true? Who benefits if I believe it? What aren't they telling me? A story you might recognize. I knew someone who lost almost all her friends for asking the wrong question. In a group chat, she simply wrote, "But what if it's more complicated than that?" She wasn't taking sides. She was inviting nuance. Within hours, the chat exploded. People accused her of being against the cause. They stopped inviting her to gatherings. Months later, she still hadn't spoken to half the people she'd known for years. Her crime was not disagreement, it was hesitation. And in a world run by the divide stage, hesitation is treated as betrayal. The emotional lock-in division works so well because it's emotional, not rational. The more outrage you feel toward the other side, the more bonded you become to your own. Outrage is addictive. Every spike of moral anger delivers a rush that makes you want more. Platforms know this. Outrage is engagement, and engagement is profit. The result? A cycle where your identity becomes defined by what you oppose, and your sense of belonging depends on never questioning your own camp. Why division matters to the loop? Sedation dulls your mind. Division hardens it in one shape. It creates mental armor against any idea that might break you out of the loop. Once your tribe has given you the correct stance, you stop investigating. You don't need to. You already know where you stand, and stepping outside it feels dangerous. The thought extinction loop can't survive on sedation alone. It needs division to ensure that when you do think, you think along narrow, pre-approved lines, and that you defend those lines fiercely against anything new. Breaking division's grip. The first step is to notice when you're being asked to choose a side before you've been given all the facts. Pay attention to how headlines are framed, how conversations shift when you introduce doubt, and how quickly outrage is rewarded. Division only works when we mistake loyalty for truth. When truth becomes more important than loyalty, the loop starts to crack. From here, the loop moves to its final stage, automate, where thinking isn't just discouraged, it's outsourced entirely. And once we get there, the loop doesn't need to control your tribe or your attention. It controls your conclusions before you even realize you've made them. Step 3 of the loop. Automate sedation makes deep thinking exhausting. Division makes questioning dangerous. And now we reach the final stage of the loop, automate, the point where you don't just stop thinking for yourself, you stop needing to. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman described 2 systems of thinking in Thinking, Fast and Slow. System 1, fast, instinctive, emotional, operates automatically and with little effort. System 2, slow, deliberate, analytical, requires focus and mental energy. System 1 is our survival mode, great for escaping predators, terrible for evaluating complex ideas. System 2 is our truth-seeking mode, great for reasoning, but slower and more tiring. The thought extinction loop thrives by keeping you in System 1 as much as possible. We all use heuristics, mental shortcuts, to navigate the endless decisions we face each day. They're not inherently bad, Without them, life would be paralyzing. But here's the danger. Platforms, media outlets, and even institutions have learned how to hijack these shortcuts. They package complex issues into bite-sized, emotionally loaded statements. They repeat them until they feel familiar. And they surround them with social proof so you accept them without question. You're left with a reflex, not a reason. Enter confirmation bias, the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms what you already believe. The loop primes you with a preloaded answer, then floods you with cues that this answer is correct and safe to hold. If you've ever clicked share on a claim simply because it aligned with your views, without checking its source, that's automation at work. Your brain got the satisfaction of being right without the cost of verifying. Not long ago, a single sentence started spreading across social media. Experts confirm that claim is now undeniable. The claim was vague enough to feel plausible and provocative enough to feel urgent. It racked up millions of shares, despite the fact that no such confirmation existed. Why? System 1 liked the clarity and emotional charge. Heuristics said, if it's everywhere, it must be true. Confirmation bias whispered, this matches what I already thought. Within hours, the automation was complete. People weren't discussing if it was true. They were discussing what to do about it, based on an unverified premise. Keeping you in System 1 isn't just convenient for those in power. It's profitable. Platforms earn more engagement when you react quickly and emotionally. Media earns more clicks from simplified outrage than from nuanced analysis. Institutions benefit when the right conclusions are reached without messy public debate. The more conclusions you accept without examination, the smoother these systems run, and the less likely you are to disrupt them. Here's the trap. Automation doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like efficiency. I already know how I feel about this. This is obviously the right answer. We all agree on this. No need to waste time debating. In reality, you've outsourced the most important part of thought, the pause between information and conclusion. That pause is where truth lives. The first step is recognizing when your reaction arrives too fast. If you already have an answer before you've looked at the details, stop. That's the moment to switch from System 1 to System 2. Ask, where did this conclusion come from? What would it take to prove me wrong? Am I reacting or am I reasoning? Automation only works when you can't tell the difference. Once you can, the loop loses its grip. Sedate dulls your focus. Divide narrows your world. Automate seals it shut. And if this loop is left unbroken, you're not just losing your ability to think. You're handing it over to systems that don't have your best interests at heart. But the loop isn't unbreakable. In fact, the moment you name its stages, you've already put cracks in it. The next step is learning exactly how to step out of it, deliberately, repeatedly, until thinking becomes yours again. So far, we've talked about the external effects of the thought extinction loop, how it sedates, divides, and automates you. But there's a quieter, more personal casualty. And it's the one most people never notice until it's almost gone. It's the death of your inner dialogue. Inner dialogue isn't just thinking to yourself. It's the private space where you explore ideas without performance or pressure. It's the voice that says, what if, and takes you down paths that don't have an immediate payoff. This is where you test beliefs, rehearse possibilities, argue with yourself, and ask questions no one else will ever hear. It's not loud, it's not urgent. And in today's world, that's exactly why it's disappearing. Under the thought extinction loop, moments of mental stillness get replaced with noise, not just sound, but informational static. Every pause in your day is filled, checking your phone while the kettle boils, scrolling in the elevator, turning on a podcast the second you start driving. Over time, the quiet moments that used to belong to your inner voice are stolen, pixel by pixel, notification by notification. And without that stillness, your mind loses the space to synthesize, reflect, and connect dots in new ways. Krishnamurti once said, "To understand the immeasurable, the mind must be extraordinarily quiet, still." That stillness isn't just restful, it's fertile. It's where creativity, wisdom, and emotional clarity grow. Remove it and you don't just lose peace, you lose depth. Creativity dies first. Without mental stillness, your mind never wanders far enough to stumble on the unusual connections that spark original ideas. Wisdom never forms. Wisdom isn't just information, it's lived experience processed through reflection. If you never stop to reflect, you never reach the deeper insight. Emotional regulation collapses. Inner dialogue is where you process frustration before it becomes anger, and fear before it becomes panic. Without it, your reactions go straight from stimulus to explosion. The result? You become more reactive, less imaginative, and more dependent on outside voices to tell you what you think. The thought extinction loop can't survive if you spend too much time in self-reflection. Silence gives you space to question the narratives, spot the manipulation, and notice the conditioning. So, it keeps you sedated with stimulation, divided by emotional loyalties, and automated with preloaded conclusions, until your inner dialogue feels like an awkward stranger you no longer know how to talk to. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat in a room alone without reaching for a device? When was the last time you followed a train of thought for more than 5 minutes without interruption? When was the last time you disagreed with yourself and explored why? If those moments are rare, your inner dialogue isn't just quiet, it's fading. Losing your inner dialogue is losing yourself. Without it, you're not living as the author of your mind, you're living as the audience to someone else's script. And here's the terrifying truth. When you stop talking to yourself, you stop knowing yourself. And when you no longer know yourself, anyone can tell you who you are. And you'll believe them. The fight to reclaim your mind starts here, in the quiet space you've been taught to fill. And if you can win this back, you can weaken the entire low. By now you've seen how the thought extinction loop sedates you, divides you, and automates your conclusions. But even if you manage to resist all 3 stages, there's still one more barrier. It's the fear of what happens when you actually start thinking for yourself. Most people don't realize how tightly their beliefs are fused with their sense of self. Your political views, your cultural values, your religious convictions. Once they become identity markers, questioning them feels like questioning who you are. That's why challenging an idea often triggers such an intense defensive reaction. You're not just debating facts, you're threatening someone's belonging, their status, even their survival in their social group. The thought extinction loop relies on this fusion. If every key belief is tied to identity, then doubting the belief risks social and emotional punishment, exile from your tribe, ridicule, loss of opportunity. For many, that's far scarier than being wrong. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. When someone else's thinking threatens to expose our shadow, we often project it back onto them. So when a thinker questions a narrative we've tied to our identity, it's easier to label them arrogant, dangerous, or immoral than to face the discomfort their idea creates inside us. This is why people attack the messenger instead of examining the message. Projection protects the ego, but it also kills the conversation. History is full of examples: whistleblowers who expose corruption, scientists who challenge the prevailing theories, philosophers who question moral dogmas. Galileo was forced to recant his evidence of a heliocentric solar system because it contradicted the Church's authority. Edward Snowden became a fugitive for revealing mass surveillance. Even Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth, in reality, for teaching them to question. In each case, the punishment wasn't for being wrong. It was for daring to think in a way that threatened the power structure's stability. When thinking feels dangerous, most people simply avoid it. They stay inside safe narratives, repeat the right slogans, and align themselves with whatever conclusions their group already accepts. This is perfect for the thought extinction loop. If the fear of social or emotional punishment is strong enough, you'll police your own mind. You won't need to be silenced. You'll silence yourself. Thinking for yourself doesn't just risk being wrong, it risks being alone. But here's the paradox, that isolation is temporary, and it's the only path to genuine connection with people who value truth over comfort. Jung believed that integrating the shadow, facing what we'd rather avoid, was the path to wholeness. The same is true for society. Only by facing uncomfortable truths, even at personal risk, can we escape the loop. By now, you understand the architecture of the thought extinction loop: sedate, divide, automate, and the hidden cost it extracts, the slow death of your own thinking. But knowledge alone doesn't break the loop. For that, you need a system. This is where the RAISE framework comes in, a 5-step protocol designed to restore your mind's ability to think clearly, courageously, and independently. It's simple enough to start today, yet powerful enough to rebuild the mental habits the loop has been quietly dismantling. R. Reduce noise. The first step is to starve the loop of its most powerful fuel, constant stimulation. Every ping, headline, and scroll is another micro-hit of dopamine, keeping your brain locked in reaction mode. Action. Choose 1 hour a day as a dopamine-free zone. No phone, no notifications, no social media. Use that time for a single, deep task: reading a book, writing by hand, or working on a long-form project. Long-term payoff. Neuroscientist Marianne Wolf has shown that deep reading literally rewires the brain for sustained thought. Over time, this quiet hour rebuilds your attention span, the mental muscle that critical thinking depends on. A. Ask better questions. The loop survives by feeding you ready-made answers. The fastest way to disrupt it is to get curious again. Instead of, "Is this true?" which often triggers defensive reactions, ask, "What would make this true?" or "What would make this false?" Action. At least once a day, write down a question that doesn't have an immediate answer. It could be about a news story, a belief you hold, or something someone said to you. Then spend 5 minutes exploring it without looking for an instant conclusion. Long-term payoff. You train your brain to seek complexity over simplicity, an antidote to the black and white thinking that makes group manipulation so easy. Curiosity is the seed of independent thought. I. Integrate opposing views. One of the loop's deadliest weapons is tribal division. It thrives on the belief that the other side is not just wrong, but dangerous. Breaking that conditioning requires deliberate exposure to opposing perspectives. Action. Once a week, consume something thoughtful from a viewpoint you disagree with: a book, a podcast, an essay. Don't engage to win or debunk. Engage to understand. Long-term payoff. This is dialectical thinking, holding two opposing ideas without rushing to collapse them into one. It strengthens cognitive flexibility and makes you harder to manipulate through outrage cycles. S. Schedule silence. Inner dialogue, that quiet conversation you have with yourself, is the first casualty of the loop. Without it, you're always reacting to the last external input. Silence isn't a luxury, it's a survival skill for the mind. Action. Block out at least 10 minutes a day for deliberate silence. No music, no podcasts, no background noise. Sit, walk, or lie down. But be alone with your thoughts. If your mind races, let it. The goal is to reacquaint yourself with the sound of your own thinking. Long-term payoff. Philosophers from Marcus Aurelius to Krishnamurti saw stillness as the wellspring of wisdom. Regular silence restores your ability to observe your own thoughts before they calcify into unexamined beliefs. E. Examine beliefs. The loop automates judgment by installing beliefs you never consciously chose. To reclaim your mind, you have to pull those beliefs into the light and ask, where did this come from? Who benefits if I keep believing it? Action. Once a week, pick one belief you hold about politics, culture, relationships, or even yourself. Write down how you formed it, what evidence supports it, and what evidence contradicts it. Long-term payoff. This is metacognition, thinking about your thinking. The more you practice, the harder it becomes for someone else to outsource your judgment to an algorithm, a headline, or a charismatic leader. Most detox advice focuses on deleting apps or taking digital breaks. The RAISE framework goes deeper. It doesn't just reduce your exposure to the loop, it rewires the habits that make the loop effective in the first place. Reduce noise restores your attention. Ask better questions reactivates curiosity. Integrate opposing views builds resilience against division. Schedule silence rebuilds inner dialogue. Examine beliefs reclaims judgment. Each step is both a shield and a sword, protecting your mind from the loop's influence while making you more capable of original thought. Here's the part that matters most. Breaking the loop isn't just personal. When you live this way, you become living proof that another way is possible. You show others, friends, family, strangers, that you can think without fear, question without hostility, and disagree without division. That's why the RAISE framework spreads. It's not about forcing others to follow it. It's about embodying the freedom it creates until other people can't help but notice the difference. Critical thinking is often sold as a nice to have, a skill for academics, debaters, or philosophers. But inside the thought extinction loop, it isn't optional, it's survival. When you learn to think for yourself, you're not just exercising a mental muscle, you're rejecting an entire system built to make you compliant. Every moment you pause to question, you are committing an act the loop was designed to prevent. That is not a skill. That is an act of rebellion. History remembers those who refuse to surrender their minds. Galileo, who challenged the church's version of the universe. Socrates, who chose death over abandoning the search for truth. Rosa Parks, whose single quiet refusal broke the spell of unquestioned rules. These people weren't born with superhuman intellect. They were simply unwilling to outsource their judgment, no matter how costly the price. Today, the punishment is quieter, but no less real. It's the unfollow button, the shadow ban, the closed doors and the whispered warnings. And yet, the moral duty remains the same: to think even when it costs you comfort. Because the loop doesn't just want your agreement, it wants your absence from the battlefield of ideas. It knows that once you're silent, it doesn't have to win the argument. It simply wins by default. So the first step is small, but it matters. Question the story you hear today. Sit in silence for 10 minutes and see what your own mind says before you check what the crowd thinks. Write down one belief and ask yourself who gave it to you. These are not small acts. In a culture trained for reflex and compliance, they are dangerous. And here's the paradox. Once enough people commit these dangerous acts, the loop weakens. You don't have to overthrow it alone. You only have to stop feeding it. If you've made it this far, you've already done something rare. You've thought alongside me without letting the loop pull you away. That means you're not just a viewer, you're part of the resistance. And in the age of manufactured consent, resistance begins with the simple, radical decision to think. If you're still here, you're not like most people. You didn't click away when this got uncomfortable. You didn't retreat into distraction. You stayed, you listened. And that tells me something important. You are already part of a small, awake minority. Most will never join us. Not because they can't, but because they won't. The loop offers them comfort, certainty, and belonging. And the cost of those illusions is their ability to think. They'll trade it away gladly, never realizing the price was their own mind. But you've seen the machinery now. You know how it sedates, divides, and automates. And you also know that once you see it, you can't unsee it. That makes you dangerous to the loop. That makes you necessary. This is not a movement of noise or slogans. It's a quiet revolution. One fought in the smallest, most invisible acts. Refusing the dopamine hit, asking the question no one else will. Pausing before you agree. Listening to the voice in your head before the crowd drowns it out. These moments don't trend. They don't go viral, but they spread. One awakened mind at a time. So, here's what I'm asking. Tell someone what you learned today. Not as a debate, not as a fight. As an invitation. Point them toward the loop so they can see it for themselves. Share this video if you have to. Not because it's content, but because it's a warning. Movements don't begin when the majority rises. They begin when a small group refuses to fall. That's where we are right now. And so, I'll leave you with one question. One you'll carry into every conversation, every news story, every headline from this moment on. When they try to kill your ability to think, will you defend it?